Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. In today's video, I'm creating a spring bunny using clay and IOD molds. For my project today, I'm going to be using this Paper Mache Bunny that I got from Kmart, Australia. This little guy was cute as is, but I'm going to be adding clay over this entire piece to give it more features, more definition. I'm going to be laying down a generous amount of my Sealy's Quickset wood glue to adhere my clay, and you can see I'm spreading it out with a paintbrush. I'm going to be using Das air dry clay, and you can see I'm just spreading it out so that it's a bit of a thinner consistency, and then I'm going to start pressing it down over the top of the sections where I have the clay. So I'm really adding that glue wherever the clay is going to go, just to be sure that it's going to stick and stay there. And then I'm just using my fingers to spread that clay out over the bunny paper mache form. In certain areas, you'll see that I use my water mister to lightly dampen that clay so that I'm able to smooth it out and blend those different pieces of clay together a little bit easier. This was definitely a bit of an involved process, which is why I sped up the rest of this particular step. I'm basically just repeating the same steps, laying down my glue and then adding my clay and really smoothing it out with my fingers, adding some water here and there. And although this is a bit involved, I think it was definitely worth it to be able to bring some more definition to this bunny and make him a little bit more whimsical, and obviously give him that definition around the face and just really bring him to life. In certain areas, you'll notice that I'm using the other end of a paintbrush to spread my clay out. I moved it in almost like a rolling motion over the top of the clay that was tricky to get to, like behind his front legs there, and that helped to smooth the clay out. Once the bunny was covered in clay, I decided to add a little bit more glue to his little muzzle there, and I'm just adding a little bit more clay to round that out a little bit more, give it a little bit more shape. It was quite a pointy shape to begin with, so just adding some more layers of clay is really going to give his face a bit more of a rounded shape. I also then added a little piece of clay to create his nose. So I just sort of rolled a little ball shape and then used my fingers to make it look a little bit more like a rounded triangle. Next, I'm going to roll up a little length of clay and I'm going to position it over the section where it would almost look like the bunny would have eyebrows. We're going to give some definition to the eye area now. So I'm just smoothing that out and making sure that it's sort of a smooth transition between those areas. And then I'm going to roll up a little ball of clay, but I'm sort of making it a little bit more like an almond shape. And then you see I did use my mister to go over the top of that area and make it a little bit smoother. And of course, I'm going to repeat the same process on the other side. To create some definition around the bunny's mouth area, I just used the end of a little slat wall hook that I had, but any sort of tool like a palette knife would work as well. So I'm just going over that area in sort of a general shape, and then I'm smoothing it out with my fingers. I also then went in with the eyes and added a little bit more definition around that shape using my palette knife. Next, I'm going to go in with the end of my paintbrush and start making some little impressions with that. So this is going to give the appearance of texture and maybe fur as well. I'm going to be doing a few techniques for this, but I did sort of envision for this piece that it would be looking a little bit like a wood carving. So I'm sort of keeping that in mind as I'm doing this as well. And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking about how the bunny's fur would be naturally showing, like what directions the fur would be going in. So I'm just trying to be keeping that in mind as I'm adding it. So I'm then coming in with the end of my palette knife and just creating some little lines there again to simulate the look of fur. You'll notice along the way that as I'm adding that texture, I'm also coming in with my fingers and smoothing it down a little bit. I don't want it to be super intense. I want it to be a little bit more subtle. I then grabbed one of my Cricut weeding tools. This actually came in surprisingly handy, and I'm coming in and adding some texture with that as well. I did speed up this particular portion as well. It was a little bit time intensive, so you'll just notice that I'm working my way around the bunny, repeating the same process, using the end of my paintbrush to create some little indents, and also the little Cricut weeding tool to create some lines to simulate fur. Next, I decided to take some clay and add it to the back of the little bunny to make his little tail stand out a little bit more. So you can see I'm just molding that clay to the surface, sort of pulling those edges out and giving it a bit more of a seamless transition. And once I was happy with the size of that, I took the Cricut tool there and I'm just doing some upward motions, making some little lines to make it look like fur. I got to this point and decided that I wanted to add just a little bit more volume to our little bunny's cheeks. So I'm just going to go in with a little bit of clay and add it to the areas underneath the bunny's eyes. You can see I'm just molding it to the surface there. I just wanted to give it a little bit more width, but you'll see I'm being careful not to disturb the eye detail that we've already put there. I'm of course adding it to the other side as well, just repeating that process, molding it to the face. And then once I'm happy with that, I did also come in and add just a little bit more to his little muzzle as well. Again, being careful not to disturb that nose. Once I was happy with the shape, I did go back in and add some more of that detail to the face. So adding in his little mouth and then also coming in and adding in some of the whiskers. Once I'd finished adding the detail to both sides of the face, I took out IOD's primitive mold and I have dusted the molds I want to use with cornstarch, and now I'm going to start working my clay into the greenery there. There's a left and right design that we're going to be using, and you'll just see I am bending and flexing that mold, and then I do flip this one over, and gravity is definitely a big help getting out these more intricate designs. You'll see I've also cast the other design from the other side and just repeating that same process to get the mold out. I also cast the flowers from this design. I really like the scale of those because they are a little bit smaller, so they suit the size of our little bunny. So I'm going to cast a few of each of those. And then I also cast the bow from IOD's Jingle Mold. This was from their Christmas release the year before last. So again, just working that clay in, flexing the mold, and then flipping it over to get that design out. I'm then going to use my Sealy's Quickset wood glue to apply some glue to the back there, and then I'm just going to wrap it around the bunny's neck, and you'll see I'm just then going to start layering some of the florals over the top. Ultimately, I almost want it to look like the little bunny's wearing a spring style wreath around his neck. I also ended up casting the smaller greenery designs from the primitive mold to add to our little wreath there, again just to give it a little bit more volume and body and to make it look a little bit more natural. Once I was happy with the positioning, I then added the bow that we cast earlier to the front, and then I decided to cast a couple of the berries from the primitive mold, but just add them in singular pieces. And then I also cast this little design over here. I'm not exactly sure if it's a feather or wheat, but we're going to actually treat it like greenery, and I'm just going to position it either side of our bow at the front. I let the clay dry overnight, and then the next morning, this is what we are working with. Our little bunny is looking very sweet with his little floral wreath there. So I'm going to be taking Paint Couture's Buttercream chalk paint, and we're going to give our bunny 2 coats of this lovely color, just painting over the entire piece. Once my 2 coats of buttercream were dry, I took Paint Couture's Autumn Sage chalk paint, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to add that beautiful green to all of the greenery molds that we added. Now, ordinarily I would have sealed the buttercream before I started coming in with color, but we're going to be doing some distressing back of this paint anyway, and I'm working in a very small area, so I'm not worried about getting paint on any other sections. Before the paint was dry, I took a wet wipe and I went in and did a little bit of wet distressing, pulling back some of that green. I really want this to look like an old, worn, carved bunny statue, so pulling this paint back is really going to add to that effect. Next, I took Paint Couture's French Rose Mineral Paint, and I'm going to be adding it to the smaller floral designs, just going around and adding that to each of those, and then I will come in and do a bit of light wet distressing with those as well. I then took Paint Couture's Sugarplum Mineral Paint, and we're going to add that to the other floral designs. Once I'm finished adding this beautiful color, I will come in with a wet wipe and do some light wet distressing as well. I'm then going to use Paint Couture's Purple Haze chalk paint on the little berries that we added. Once my paint was completely dry, I took Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze, and I'm going to be adding this over our entire bunny. I'm really working it into all of those carving style details that we added in the clay, and obviously over the flowers. Again, I want this to look quite old, even a little bit primitive, and once I'm happy with the coverage in certain areas, you'll see I'm using a wet wipe to pull some of it back. Again, sometimes when I'm doing this, I will use a clear coat underneath, but I actually want more of this to stay there. So I don't mind if it's uneven. It's almost going to look like wood tone. So I'm happy to skip that step in this case. So again, working it into those floral details and over the bow, and then using a wet wipe to pull it back. If I've inspired you to try any of these Paint Couture products, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link. You will find it in the description and I'll pop it on the screen. I just get a little thank you from Paint Couture in return. When my glaze was completely dry, I took the brush that I had been using with the Buttercream chalk paint at the start. I'm offloading most of that paint, and then I'm going to go over the top of our bunny and do some light dry brushing, just really catching all of those floral molds and obviously the details that we added to the clay. When my paint was dry, I took Paint Couture's Pitch Black chalk paint. I'm going to draw a little circle in the center of each of our bunny's eyes. When that was dry, I took Buttercream chalk paint, and I am going to use the end of my paintbrush to do a little white dot in the center of each of the eyes. When that was dry, I took a wet wipe and did some light wet distressing to make the eyes appear old, in keeping with the rest of the bunny. Now I could have definitely left it here, but I took Paint Couture's Bronze Luxe Metallic and I'm going to add it to our little bunny's nose. And then once I'm happy with that, I'm going to add it to the bow at the front there. And I am also going to be adding it to our florals. Now, some of you might be thinking it might be a little bit over the top, but I do love a little bit of metallic, and we are going to be doing some distressing back of this as well. So just adding it to the florals. And then once the paint was almost completely dry, as I said, I just took a wet wipe and did some light distressing to pull back some of that bronze. And here's our finished spring bunny. I love how this turned out. It was really fun to step outside my comfort zone and try something different. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find most of the products used today on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.